welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and you're listening to episode 120 with Robert Yeoman, ASC, DP of Asteroid City. Enjoy.
Pretty good DVD collection and Blu-rays, and I like having that, and it's I guess it's like people in music who have albums, you just, a lot of people I know are, I gave my albums a long time ago, and then I got into CDs, and now everyone says get rid of your CDs. So, but I've got boxes of CDs and Blu-rays and DVDs, and I'm kind of old school that way, I guess. So I like having the physical thing. So
yeah, well, if you couldn't tell by this visage, super hipster. So I've got tons of vinyl still. Well, CDs are coming back. Kids are buying tapes now. They're like, I like the warm sound of tapes. Like that's not one I thought was coming back.
Well, most of my albums were scratched up anyway, so it's like the CDs are good. I mean, yeah, the albums are for the purists, and I think that's I admire that, but they take up a lot of room, and if I had to give something up, but I still have my bookcases of CDs and all that stuff.
Yeah. Did you come from a musical background? For some reason, like most DPs that I talked to, we all ended up being drummers.
I wish I did. Oddly enough, when I was a young child, my parents gave me an accordion. And I hated the accordion. And, when you're 11 or 12 years old, that's the last thing you want to do is practice an accordion.
Right.
So I can't really say. And then later in my life, I always wanted to learn how to play guitar. And so later in my life, when I had my daughter, we have a piano in our house. So she took piano lessons, and then we started taking guitar lessons. So I learned to play, some Beach Boys, some simple Beatles songs, and, and I was given by Bill Polad, when we did the Brian Wilson movie, he gave me a bass guitar, the same model that Brian used to play. So it's electric guitar, and we have an amp now, and I plunk around. But I got to say, I'm not a very good guitar player. But I've always loved music, and I've been to a million rock and roll shows. And when I was a kid, I'd go all the time, which explains my hearing loss today, because when you go to see the Who and Led Zeppelin and the Stones and those types of bands, they're pretty loud, and you come out the next day or so. But when you're 18, 19 years old, you don't think about that stuff. You think, who cares? When you're old, that's a long time away. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm starting to pay the price now.
One of my jobs, so I was a drummer. One of my jobs was in college was photographing concerts. And then afterwards I worked for Red Bull for a while. Same thing, shooting concerts and events. And this just occurred to me last night, but it always ends up popping up because of the way I would shoot the photos with my ear towards the stage, my left ear towards the stage. I'll have like one headphone in, and I'm like, it's kind of quiet, and I'll like jack up the sound, and then maybe I get uncomfortable and switch it to my right ear, and I'm like, oh my God, suddenly.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. You're still pretty young, but yeah, the concerts, though I did go to a Rammstein
yeah, sure,
a show in Boston about a year ago, and it was really loud, and I was offered earplugs, but I said, nah, and we weren't right up next to the stage anyway, but it was quite a spectacle. If you know Rammstein.
Oh yeah. That dude was an Olympic swimmer.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I didn't know.
The singer. Yeah.
Well,
Germany
put on quite a show. I hadn't been to a show like that in a long time, and the lighting and everything else. And
wasn't it? They usually have tons of pyro, right?
Oh, tons. Yeah, no, it's really spectacular. And it was at the football stadium outside of Boston, and so we were outside, and again, we weren't right up in the front. So, But it was fun. I mean, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and, but, I'm getting too old to go to concerts. So, I don't go very often anymore.
Yeah, me and my girlfriend, for some reason this year, just got a bug in our bonnet. We've been to like 6 and we got about 4 more left. And we really started to take note of like the better venues to be at in Los Angeles right now. Like sometimes they're like Anaheim's House of Blues is all jacked up, or they'll just oversell the floor seating, so you can't see shit. And then other places, the Rocks, no, not the Rock. Anyway, doesn't matter. A lot of good bands coming through LA right now, though.
I actually got a job operating a camera at the Crossroads Guitar Festival that Eric Clapton hosted.
Oh, sure.
And they had Santana there, and they had, John Mayer, they had Sheryl Crow, they had ZZ Top. They all would come out and play with each other, and it was really fun, seeing. And these are a lot of legends more from my time period, and so to see them up there rocking away at their old age was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. Say again.
I was gonna say that was the last concert I went to, and it was 2 days, and it goes on for like 6 hours. It's not like it's a 2-hour concert. They just keep trotting more people out, and it was really. I was always a big Clapton fan as a kid, so it was really great seeing that. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah. That actually made me think of a separate question, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I did want, in the same kind of vein. I know you just said you've been busy, but have you? Most people seem to not. So I'm going to change this question for next season. But have you been watching anything interesting recently, or are you kind of like when you get off work, you don't want to see a screen?
Well, I started this fall. I took a job teaching at USC in cinematography. So I've been watching a lot of student films, and some of them are pretty good, and that's been a real new thing for me. And I went to see Oppenheimer, which I thought was really amazing. And then I went to see, my daughter and I went to see Barbie, which was not a movie that I, was dying to go see, but I was pretty impressed with it, I mean, technically there was a lot of cool stuff going on in the film, and, I thought it was pretty good, and Ryan Gosling.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, Ryan Gosling was really great, and so I was surprised by that one. But now that the big movies are coming out, Killers of the Flower Moon, those types of movies, it's, for the Academy, I'm able to go to all these screenings where, like when I went to Barbie, Greta Gerwig was there, and Rodrigo Prieto, and the production designer. So then you stay afterwards and hear him talk about it, and it makes it a little more interesting. And so I always try to see the movies that are up for Best Picture and Best Cinematography in a theater.
Sure.
So I'm going to start getting busy with that, and balance that. My son's a soccer player, so I have to balance it with his soccer practices.
Yeah.
So the weekends are always games everywhere, so that's what we do. Go to travel to San Diego for soccer games.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that was something that I was telling one of the PR teams about, was like, because I get invited to a lot of screeners, but oftentimes, it's just an email blast. It's not like, hey, you come to this. But I was saying, like, next year I kind of want to prioritize going to those because, A, oftentimes the filmmakers are there, which is great. But B, I've noticed they are not like the best networking thing in the world to do, but you do end up meeting a lot of cool people outside, especially when there's like a reception or whatever.
Yeah, usually they do have a reception, and you run into people you haven't seen forever, and catch up, and particularly with the strikes that have been happening, people have a little more free time. They're not working, and so people are starting to attend these things pretty heavily. So I found that certain ones. There was a David Fincher movie, The Killers or something.
Yeah.
I RSVP'd to that, but they said, sorry, it's already full. So
you can't pull a "Do you know who I am" card or nothing.
No, I guess there's a lot of people who are doing, and so they'll have more screenings. I'll see that film. I want to see it, but
yeah, I looked that up. yesterday, and I guess it's not playing at AMC's, but I guess right now you can catch it at like a couple Regals in our area, or like, there's a few, but it's only like 4 p.m. and 7 p.m.
Oh wow, that's so weird.
Yeah, but there's a few theaters, but I think they're all just doing smaller showings.
Great, because you think someone like David Fincher that would give it a big wide release. It's a pretty important filmmaker.
Did Mank get released in theaters?
Because I saw it in a theater, but I think I saw it at the Academy, maybe, they had people speaking afterwards, but I did see it in a theater, but I don't recall if it was, I assume it was, but maybe not.
I feel like he's kind of all in on streaming now.
Maybe that's it. Maybe he's the one, I know when I did Henry Sugar with Wes, that's been on Netflix,
Right.
I originally wanted to there's 4 different stories. He wanted to put them all together and release them in the theater so you could see all 4 of them. But I know that Netflix had another idea. And so, that's how they released it now. It's on Netflix. But, I hate to say it, but I mean, I'm a kind of a purist, but I do watch most of my movies now on Netflix, or I've been watching the Beckham documentary,
Sure, yeah.
Occasionally even I watch movies on my computer, I'm embarrassed to say. But the big ones, and like I said, the ones that are up for big awards, I do see them in the theaters now. I think that's important, particularly for cinematography or Best Picture.
Yeah. Well, and I remember seeing this one, I'm doing, this is another New Year's resolution I got, is like, I'm just going to get off YouTube completely. Like, I can't stand it anymore. But I was, hate watching some stuff. And this one kid was bemoaning the death of cinema and how Oppenheimer was going to save cinema. And then he went on to say, almost in the same breath, how he hasn't been to a theater in like 2-3 years. And this is the movie that's bringing it back. And I'm like, sir, you are the reason that's not existing.
Yeah. Well, even like at the Barbie screening, just being with the crowd of people, it was at the and just people laughing and enjoying it, and that there's something about that communal experience that you obviously don't get at home. And, I think it increases your enjoyment of the film when you hear other people laughing, and, we're all sitting in a dark room kind of sharing this experience. And it's one of the things, I mean, I grew up going to movies all the time, and that was, we had just tiny little TVs at our house. And it was a whole different experience. So I would probably go to movies at least once a week, and that was part of my growing up experience. And so I do miss it, for sure.
Yeah. Was from Chicago, right?
Yeah, originally, yeah.
Was the John Hughes kind of wave impactful on you at all, just being kind of local to you, or did that not really?
Not really. I mean, it's not like I didn't like those movies, but they didn't, certainly Breakfast Club was a big movie, and but I was kind of more, I movies like The Graduate and The Heat of the Night, those were the Lawrence of Arabia, those were the movies that really made an influence on me. And trying to think of other ones that just, but I like the spaghetti westerns, the Clint Eastwood spaghetti. I love those. I was fanatic about those movies. And so those were kind of movies, and a lot of Hitchcock movies. At our local theater where I lived in a suburb, Friday nights, when I was like 7th grade, everybody would just ride their bike to the local theater and go see the movie, and then go get an ice cream afterwards or something. It's kind of a social thing. And in that, as a benefit to all that, I was seeing I remember seeing Psycho and The Birds and those kinds of movies, and just being like, petrified, but so I was getting a real education, whether I knew it or not, about filmmaking, it was, but it also, opened up your eyes to so many other things. But as a kid growing up in Chicago, I didn't really think about, I'm going to go work in the film industry. no one did in my hometown, and it was just like that was something in Hollywood that, I had no, idea that would be where my path would take at that time.
So for me, it was, I was going to say, for me, it was the growing up in the Bay Area, because there was just so much that made, for whatever reason, that made a film feel more accessible than moving down to LA and trying to do it here, like the, Coppola and Lucas and Hallman and all them.
Yeah, well, they were all up there. Lucas set up Skywalker Ranch, and Coppola lives up there, and so there is a certain, the Bay Area has got a lot of filmmakers, but, back then, when I grew up, if you were like Billy Friedkin or some of the big director, John Hughes, I don't know, I guess, did John Hughes stay living in Chicago? A lot of them moved out of Chicago and moved to LA.
Yeah. I imagine you just shot out there.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't the film community. Back when I was a kid, it was LA and New York, basically, and now, of course, it's changed with Atlanta and all these other places that, and I've done 3 movies in Boston, there's a film community in a lot of major cities now. And I've shot in San Francisco, but back in the 70s, it was LA and New York pretty much.
Yeah. When you had mentioned the education thing, and that brought me back to the question I was going to ask, which was, like, you went to Duke. Did you played on the basketball team at Duke?
I was a walk-on my freshman year.
Oh, fair enough. But like Duke and SC, and now you're teaching at SC. What are some of the differences that you're seeing between the students now and when you were there? Because obviously SC's storied film tradition. There's probably a little more going on than I went to Arizona State, and the film school had started 2 years before I got there, so the pedigree was not quite there yet. Now they're the Sidney Poitier School of Theater and Television. But like, what are you seeing? Like, is the access to new technology making them better filmmakers off rip, or what? What's going on over there?
Yeah, definitely. I think that when I was at USC, we didn't have the facilities that we have now at USC. I mean, they've gone through 2 major buildings. Like when I was there, it was like a Quonset hut, and we shot 16 millimeter black and white film. That was it, and the facilities for that time were probably pretty good, but they are almost prehistoric compared to what they have now, and so the facilities are much better. I don't know how to say this duckly, but I think that faculty is much better because
because you're teaching there.
Me and just a lot of my colleagues are people who were very successful in the film business, and now they're teaching at USC, and they bring that perspective to it. And I have a theory that every generation the bar gets raised in everything. Like I played basketball, and like if we played back then, the kids who are playing today, they would smoke us. My son was playing soccer. He's 13 years old, and I mean, these kids are like pros. I mean, they're amazingly good, and so every generation the bar is raised a little bit. And I think the kids making the films at USC today are making better films than we did, and they're much, I think also being the access because of the internet and Netflix and all the things you can stream, they have more access to more things, than we did. And so obviously their brains are accumulating a much larger library of things than we were able to. And I mean, when I was young, we didn't even have VHS tapes, so if you wanted to see a movie, it was shown on TV with a bunch of commercials, or you would go to a theater, and there was a place when I was at USC called the Fox Venice Theater down in Lincoln in Venice, and they would show 2 or 3 kind of art house movies every night. They would switch them, and we would go all the time, and you'd see all the USC students just to see these movies, and they were usually double bills, and Ken Russell movies, or anything that just you wouldn't get a chance to see. And so a lot of our education came from the Fox Venice Theater.
Right.
But today, you just go online and you can pretty much watch anything. So I think the kids today are a level way above what we were, for sure.
Sure, because it kind of brings me to the whole. Obviously, we could talk about your entire filmography, but we'll stick to the Wes Anderson chunk just for sake of the theme of this interview. But like I said, I watched all the Criterions yesterday, and the thing that was kind of interesting for me was Bottle Rocket looks very much not like a student film in a pejorative way, but it's simple in a certain way. And then you've got something like Asteroid City, which is simple in a different way. And I was wondering if that rings true to you and where you draw, because like even in Bottle Rocket and even in Rushmore, there isn't that locked off proscenium thing happening yet. There's still a lot of feels like you guys are still figuring all that out and stuff. So in what ways were they simple similarly? In what ways were they simple differently? If that's
well,
is that a good question?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. I think certainly Bottle Rocket was Wes's first movie, and he was still learning. He had done a short, and but in terms of just the technology and what was available, and he depended on me pretty heavily to help him at that point. But obviously he's a very bright guy and picks up all this stuff very quickly. And, so I think his style was just, he hadn't quite totally figured out his style at that point. And Rushmore was, for me, the first one where he really started to, okay. And Wes, he had directed a lot of theater in high school and grade school. And so, and he noticed in Rushmore, there's 2 plays, and so as we've gone on, we've gotten a little more theatrical. And I think also when he did those animated films, which I was not part of, he learned a lot about different ways of doing things, because in real life you're kind of restricted by physical whatever, animation
walls,
whatever you want, And I also think that the technology has changed so much, particularly even though we shoot film, when you look, almost everything is done digitally in post now. And those technologies did not exist when we started. I like on Rushmore with the curtains, we actually had these curtains we put in front of the camera and we'd open them. And,
right.
We didn't use that, back then we didn't use any, I can't think there were any visual effects on Bottle Rocket or Rushmore, none, and it's and I remember on Royal Tenenbaums, we were shooting down by the boat docks in New York, and the boat came in and they didn't like Wes didn't like the name of the boat. And so they went and fixed that digitally. That was the first time I recall ever doing any sort of digital effect, And as time has gone on, and post-production techniques particularly have, skyrocketed. I think, and Wes is very savvy to all these techniques, and particularly having worked on the animated films. And as now, I think we still try to do almost everything in camera, but there are certain things that happen. And he also he started using miniatures and things of that nature that we never did at the beginning. And so his grasp as a filmmaker has changed. So I think that's what you're seeing in Asteroid City, or you're seeing the Friends Dispatch, more and more of that, that it is sometimes like, we'll be doing something and there'll be an element that will be added later to the shot that we,
right.
Going to be done later. So,
well,
that's.
Well, and it also, what was funny was on the Criterion for Grand Budapest, there's a whole half-hour mini doc about the visual effects in the film. There's they said 300 to 400 VFX shots.
Yeah.
And it makes me laugh because there's always these conversations online about, and in person, but like, no one wants to see visual effects anymore. Like doing it in camera is real. And you guys are very much the in-camera camp.
Yep.
But 400 visual effects shots, but they're invisible, so no one thinks about it. It's just changing a facade or adding a whatever.
Yeah, that's basically what it is, and
Split comps.
There were miniatures, in that, and certainly that whole sequence where the skiing sequence. Because I remember when I read the script, I said to Wes, "What are we going to do? Fly to Switzerland? This? How are we going to do this?" And there was a lot of discussion about it, and then he decided to make it animated. Which and it's the same thing happened in French Dispatch when they have the car chase, with the big wrestler guy. And I was like, so, are we going to have a big car chase and do all this at night? And he said, no, I'm going to make it kind of comic booky, and it adds an element to the film. Like the alien in Asteroid City.
That got a huge laugh at my theater, by the way.
I think, I've seen the movie numerous times. And, Jeff Goblin was the actual alien, and he had to wear these stilts and learn how to walk on the stilts. And it's just, I don't know that he could have bent down and picked up the thing. And just physically, I think it would have been impossible for him,
Right.
And it's so sometimes Wes will look at possibilities, and not that he's ever afraid to just say, let's do it this way, but he knew that that character in Asteroid City had some humorous aspects about him. I don't know that, as much as I love Jeff and what a fantastic actor he is, I don't know if he could have gotten that where he's wearing that heavy costume with the stilts and everything. I don't know. And the animated character gave like you said, it was humorous and funny, and it gave a whole other feeling that I think we probably could have gotten in live action, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I agree. I mean, especially because the color sequences are the play, but they're super polished. It doesn't look like a play. And I think putting someone in a costume would have looked less real. Because it's an alien, it's got to look otherworldly to some degree. So I think it stylistically, I think it actually works better that way.
Yeah. And I'm, and like I said, Wes is, if he felt it would have been better with Jeff doing it, he would have done it. But
Sure.
I think he felt that, this gave him a little more possibilities, and that's why he chose to do it that way, and also obviously we can't have a giant spaceship come down. I mean,
Right.
and even the train sequence at the beginning, those are miniature trains.
Which I didn't realize until I saw behind the scenes. In theater, I just thought that was like either a combination of real trains and something else, but I didn't really think about it. But those were amazing miniatures.
Well, there's, and I think it was the guy from Germany, I can't remember his name, but he builds these things, and they, with miniatures, the larger you could make it, the better. And then they had to create miniature cactuses and miniature mountains. And, that was the second unit that was doing that on the train stuff. So, but I'm sure it was tricky, but I agree. I thought it came out beautifully, really well. So,
yeah, it occurs to me. So one thing, because you said you hadn't heard this podcast before, my brain is in 1,000 places at once, so it will be a little jump aroundy. But
yeah.
I did. I did want to ask, what was your relationship like, or what is your relationship like with Adam Stockhausen in all these films? Because obviously the PD and the DP have a very kind of interlinked relationship that cannot be pulled apart.
It's the production designer is, the director is my best friend, and the production designer is my second best friend. And, I spent a lot of time in the art department. Adam is very generous, and obviously very bright. He's thought through so much of this stuff beforehand, and if there's something that I need, I will go to Adam. I'll give you an example. Like in Asteroid City, when Adam built that town, certainly Wes and I were involved, but but Wes had this concept that we wouldn't use any movie lights in that
right. I did want to ask about that too.
What was the concept? And I knew I'd be in trouble because it was the desert in Spain in the summer. It was very bright, very hot. And if you're inside, typically you would use lights to, otherwise the people, if you expose for the outside, the people inside are dark, or if you expose for the people inside, the outside just blows out, and why are we even there, So at first I was like, oh man, how am I going to do this without any lights? But then I thought, I look back to when they first started making movies in New Jersey, they would just have skylights, and rotate the sets. But so I kind of took that concept, and obviously we couldn't rotate the sets, but I asked if we could put skylights in the buildings where we were shooting interiors, like the diner, in the Jason and Scarlett's, the motel rooms where we were doing the shots there. And then I would cover them with a very soft diffusion material. And because we were shooting anamorphic in all those sequences, you typically, the only time you would ever, it's because the frame is very long and narrow, the only time you will see the ceiling is at the far end, like in the diner. So we had little panels that we could just put on there, and if we see them, and then and it kind of worked out really beautifully for me because, if you know anything about photography, with my meter, I could put the people. Say I was reading like 8 on the people inside with the skylights, because we shoot film, and I just put them a stop down, and then the exterior was like a stop and a half over, so it's a natural kind of perfect balance. And on the rare occasions that clouds would come in, that would mean the interior was down a little bit, but the exterior was down by the same amount. So then you just open up the aperture. So it worked out pretty well. And Adam, anything we ever need from Adam, we just say, oh, could you do this for us? And he never blinks, he just does it. And he does it beautifully. And, if we ever need anything from him, oh, could you give us this or give us that? Or we particularly, we do a lot with practicals, and he supervises that with the set decorators. And we always, for the night scenes, we always have a lot of practicals. And,
right.
And we do a lot of testing generally of color, like in Grand Budapest. The color of the walls of that hotel were very carefully selected. And what Adam does in prep is he paints little 4x8 sheets with different shades of that color. And then I try to create the lighting, how we're going to do it in the movie. And then we can look at it and select, which color to paint the walls. So there's a lot of collaboration that goes on between us. And, they often build these little models in the art department, and I hang out in there and look at the models so I can kind of think about things. And, Adam he's a genius. Working with him, and it's amazing no matter, and, Wes is not easy on the art department. He throws them a lot of curveballs, and they always manage to come through. It's amazing, they're incredible. I'm in awe sometimes of what he can pull off in his team.
Yeah. Asteroid City specifically just looks so like it's perfect in terms of that. But I did want to kind of go down the path of lighting because obviously cinematography podcast. But I had read that you had done the skylight thing, just like putting in the scrim or whatever,
Fusion.
But or the diffusion. But scrim goes on a regular. Anyway, I noticed on a lot of your films, you'll just kind of have the either light coming from outside the set or just a shit ton of practicals, and then carry around maybe a China ball or something to that effect. Were you also doing that in Asteroid City, or was that no film light rule pretty hard and fast, and it was just all bounce?
In the town of Asteroid City, there was no film lights. Obviously, the black and white stage stuff was a whole different thing. It was a major lighting deal. But in the town, we kind of held to that no lights. And Wes was very eager to occasionally we might try to think if we even used silks. I mean, I think we must have at some point used a silk or something, but there's no electric lights being plugged in ever, and that was kind of the concept. And we adhered to that.
Yeah.
Some bounce cards occasionally, things like that. Most directors, and Wes in particular, really, the less gear you have on the set, the more the happier they are. And so even if I have lights, typically we try to keep them from the outside, and in Grand Budapest, there was always not always, but in where we were shooting the hotel, there was a giant skylight up top. In the prison, there was a skylight. In the spa, the bath sequence, there was a skylight. So we put big lights shining through the top, and so you never see them, And then we had the practicals, and then, like you said, we would use one or maybe two little lights to just kind of give the actors some shape, and that's how we did it. And it allows you to move much faster, because we actually move pretty quickly, and when the actors are there, Wes likes to keep the momentum going. So that's what we do.
Yeah. I did see in some of the behind the scenes stuff for, I think it was Grand Budapest, where we at Notes, Rushmore looked pretty similar, but there were some, you seem to do the thing that we all love to do, which is just as big of a source as possible, diffused it to all hell, kind of as close as you could get, like this, where Jude Law and F. Maria Abraham are talking.
Yeah.
That looked like it had a, it looked like that was a giant.
The one where they're sitting at the table there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a little bit bigger because we were in a giant auditorium. It was actually a gym. Yeah. And the art department came in and they did a little painting and they propped it up a little bit, bring some props in and tables and everything. And, but it was pretty dark in there. So we had these, what they call clouds. They're like balloon lights up top. They gave us soft light everywhere. And then we did have some lights, on stands and things just to kind of fill them in. We needed to because it was so dark in there, But so that was a pretty major lighting setup for sure. But I did make it look natural, really. So
totally. But I did, to the point of Asteroid City, did want to ask, like, how, besides just placing the sun where you needed it, how were you managing those potentially extreme contrast level? Like obviously the huts are white, so you can get a little bounce off there. You had that little lattice work thing, but were you just kind of leaning back on old film school kind of techniques of just, like you said, bounce card and stuff, or were there like specific things that you were able to do to really make that work? Was the color grade part of that? Because obviously that's been
well, because we were often shooting it, we shot all day, so often it was towards the middle part of the day where the lighting was a little harsher. And in the color grade, and I credit Wes with this, he there's so much information on a film negative. They took a little more low-con than what our dailies were. And they pushed the color saturation to a more pastel look. Our dailies looked a little more realistic, lack of a better word. And so Wes came up with this concept, and they sent it to, he's in England, I was in LA, and they sent it to me, and I saw it, and I loved it. I said, well, yeah, that's fantastic, and it kind of softened a lot of that. And it's because, again, in post-production, this is all done digitally, so you have much more control on the image than we used to with just film finishes, so there's a lot of things you can do in post to really smooth everything out. And so that was done in that what we call the digital intermediate, the DI.
Yeah, I've been over the pandemic, I obviously couldn't shoot anything, so I started freelance coloring because people had stuff in post, and it's certainly been educational to know what you can and cannot do in Resolve as a DP, just because I feel like it's made me a much more effective DP, because I can tell the director, like, oh, no, don't flag that off. Well, that'll take too long. We can fix that. Versus someone going, "Oh, you can fix that," right? And you go, "I'm pretty sure," not realizing what a headache you've put on your colorist.
Well, I tell everybody, students, that that's something about being a cinematographer today. You really have to know what is possible. And I spent a lot of time in DI suites and, post-production houses. And, I have a pretty good handle on things. But, they can always come up with something that they can do that I wasn't aware of. And, but as a cinematographer, you have to be aware of all those things because, that's the final go around on your image, and you don't want someone else coming in and totally changing what you had intended, which, it has happened to me over the years, and particularly in commercials. We'll shoot something, whether it's film or digital, generally digital, and we'll light it a certain way, and then you see it on the air, and it's usually much brighter and much flatter than what we shot, and so that's always a little disappointing, but because they say they're doing the final color timing in New York or whatever, I can't be there, and everyone kind of gets nervous and makes it brighter and flatter, basically, and so that happens quite a bit. And at first, I used to get angry about that. Now I just let it go. But for a movie, I really make a point of being there, or at least like when Wes is doing it in England, they send me what they have, and then here in LA, and then I give them notes on what I think. So it's important to at least be part of that process. Ideally, you're there when it's happening.
Yeah, it is kind of frustrating because I've said this a million times, but obviously being a cinematographer, these days you have, like you said, 1 foot square in post because of the DI. And it does feel like getting the DP in the suite is not prioritized at any level. Like I feel like I've done 120 of these interviews, and it feels like maybe less than half of them actually get to have a final say as it's happening. Obviously you build the LUT beforehand a lot of times, but a lot of times it seems to just go.
Well, oftentimes the DP's on another movie, and you might be in another country, or so I think all DPs want to be there, but it's not always possible. And because these things often go on for a period of time, like Asteroid City, in England, I'm back here in LA. I've got other things going on, and I can't be there. So. But I think that at least they would do a pass, send it to me in LA, I'd screen it, and then make my comments. So maybe this should be darker, maybe this should be this, maybe this should be that. And send them back to Wes, and he can take them or not. He's very, more than any other director, he's very much in control of everything.
Right.
Some directors will just say, "Oh, yeah, Bob, you go do it." And then they come in at the end and look at it and make a comment or two, or "Yeah, that's great," or they might say, "Could we make that one scene a little more brighter?" Whatever. And is there anything we can do about it? But so it runs the gamut from someone who wants to be totally in control to that, and everything somewhere in between, So, but typically do the DIs.
Yeah, well, and that brings up something I did want to ask, which was. You had mentioned it, and I think it was like a BAFTA interview or something, but that Wes is incredibly precise, enjoys precision. Obviously, we can see that in his compositions, it being dialed in center and all that. But I imagine that also means workflow-wise, just like everything being, but also that he prefers to do things a little more handheld, a little more traditional, a little more old school. And I was wondering if there were any tips from those kind of smaller, because hilariously enough, those sets are small for people who don't know. What's the average crew size on a Wes Anderson film?
Well, or
maybe on Asteroid City, let's say.
Yeah, it's pretty big. I don't know the number of that.
Oh, really?
But on set, see, Wes has this thing. He wants to feel like he's making a student film.
Right.
So all the stuff, the preparation with the art department, or if like on the stages when we do the lighting, that's all pre-lit. He's not there. So when he walks into the set, it's Wes, myself, I operate the camera. my focus puller, the second AC, the boom guy, the AD, maybe a producer, maybe not, a script person, that's 8 people on set, or 9 people. And so everybody else is somewhere else,
Right.
He doesn't want, wardrobe or hair and makeup people going in between every take and mussing up their hair and doing whatever they do. And he just wants to get the ball rolling, and he wants to create an atmosphere for the actors to feel safe and not a lot of people around, not people sitting there on their phones texting. I mean, the phones are, verboten. You can't have a phone on set, and it's a much more intimate atmosphere. And typically we don't have a lot of gear out there either, so that the actors are actually feeling part of this room, and that's his concern. And no distractions, not people walking around in the backgrounds, and so on set there's usually anywhere from, like on Darjeeling, there was like 3 or 4 people in the room because we were in that tiny little plane. It'd be me, a focus puller, a dolly grip, and a boom guy, and Wes, and that would be it, because there was no room for anybody else,
Yeah.
And so anywhere from 3 or 4 people to 8 or 9 people is the typical set, and he likes to keep it small. And if you're not actually doing something there, pushing a dolly or pulling focus or something, you're probably not going to be there,
Yeah.
because he's very adamant about that. And I actually really enjoy it. There's no video villages. There's none of that. He's got a little monitor, and he sits next to the camera with his little monitor watching the shot, and he's watching the actors. And it's kind of old school that way, but I think it just creates a better atmosphere. And I've been on sets where there's like 4 or 5, giant video villages, and there's all these people, and it's just a big deal. And they're not as much fun for me. I prefer.
Yeah. Well, and I've interviewed Eric Messerschmidt and Cronenweth, and we had mentioned Fincher earlier, and I feel like he has a similar vibe in the sense of like the most time possible with the actors. This doesn't need to be overlit. Like, let's just keep everything kind of simple. And but Fincher obviously super reliant on technology. Everything is the newest, sharpest tool. And I was wondering if in your mind, if there's any tools that you maybe wish Wes would lean into looking at, because I know you guys obviously like getting the Sky panel. I saw was like was an exciting thing for you guys.
Well, yeah. I mean, the problem with the Sky panels is they're expensive, and
Vortexes, baby.
Is that okay? Is your dog?
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna say the cream source, the Vortexes. They're
yeah. No, they're expensive. And what we typically do is, if say I'm on a stage, we line the ceiling with Sky panels. And on Asteroid City, it was a little bit of a push and shove, but we got some Sky panels. But again, they're very expensive. And but then Wes could see we could change the color temperature of them. And when the spaceship arrives, when they're all around in that night scene there, and the spaceship arrives, and I could turn them to green, as the spaceship comes down, and we can make them more intense. We can take them less intense, and it's all on a board, and it happens so quickly. So I always argue, okay, maybe they're expensive, but, then when you're shooting, everything happens way faster. And it was funny because when Wes saw the Sky panels in Asteroid City, he said, on our next thing, I want you to just pepper the whole ceiling with Sky panels. So we did Henry Sugar in England. And when the producer got the Sky panel bill, she freaked out and was like, are you kidding me? This is outrageous. And I said, okay, we can go 2 ways. We can not get the Sky panels. And when Wes shows up on the first day of set, he's going to look at me and say, where's the Sky panels?
Where's the iPad?
So it won't pay for them, and you're going to get fired. Or we can just get the sky panels now and say, okay, and then he'll be happy, and it'll work much faster. So okay, let's get the sky panels, So that was something that he really embraced, because he knew it would save him time and it gave him much more flexibility, and but we've had some bad luck with other things. Like we had he's kind of against techno cranes, and
right.
We were doing a shot in French Dispatch where Sanjay, our grip, and I both made a strong case to him. We needed a techno crane, and he was like, "Really? You really need a techno crane? Oh, no, I hate those things." So we really said, "Yeah, that's the only way to do it." So he finally agreed, and it was our first shot on Monday morning. Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody, big cast, everybody's there. First shot Monday morning, and the techno crane had to come from Paris, which is several hours away.
Oh, geez.
And it didn't work. And Sanjay and I are like sweating bullets, and this French guy's trying to fix the techno crane. And we look over at Wes, and he's way in the distance, kind of looking at us, kind of nodding, and I looked at Sanjay, and I said, "Well, I guess we'll never see a techno crane out of Wes Anderson movie again." And yeah, but they never got it to work. And then we kind of rigged this thing. Sanjay had a jib arm, and we kind of rigged this, and it worked pretty well. But the techno would have been easier. And it's funny because I've used techno cranes a million times, and they always work. It was but he snake bit. We also did a thing where we would use condors, which are lifts. So we have to do high angles. We would Wes and I would go up with the camera in a condor, and invariably, you get up there and you have to turn it off because it makes noise and it shakes. They couldn't turn it on again, and we'd be stuck. So after we did that a few times, Wes was like, "Okay, no more of these things." So then we'd have to build scaffolds like they did in the old days, and just haul the camera up on the scaffold and do it that way. So there's been a little bit of give and take in all this, but he definitely prefers the old tried and true over relying on technology to achieve things.
Yeah, that does kind of make me think about I had seen. This must have been in the Grand Budapest Special Features, but how you'll shoot one scene for another, one side might be on a set and then you do the over and it's outdoor, those trains and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, wow, this is actually two separate questions, but whatever. How do you make stage interior exteriors look natural? Because there's so many, I'm just thinking about trains and stuff now, but you do such a good job of making it seem just as natural as all the stuff you shoot outside. And I was wondering if you had any tips for people trying to light an interior to look like it's, not on a set.
Yeah. I mean, well, the important thing is to know what you're matching to. So if the sun is out and you're matching to something outside, you got to know where the sun is going to be so you can recreate that on your side of the interior. And just, typically outside, there's one shadow. It's the sun, and so I try to create an ambience inside that's very soft. And if, say, we're on a stage, we put the sky panels up, and sometimes I'll even put a giant silk underneath them. And, if I can, I will. And that just smooths it all out. So there really isn't much of a shadow. It's almost negligible. And then you could put the sun in the interior. And then there's a certain amount of color timing to try to match the two, because there's always going to be little subtle shifts in that. But this, again, with the DI and modern technology, you can get it pretty close and get the contrast level to match the outside pretty well. But you try to build all that in, and so if things are really contrasty outside, I try to make it, the same inside, and, even Moonrise Kingdom, that red house,
Mm.
We found that, and it was a perfect overlooking the bay there. So we shot in that direction during the day and night. But then Wes did not like what was across the street, and so we'd have to go somewhere else and kind of try to match that. And also the interiors were all built on. We had a warehouse, so all those interiors of that house were built because we just never could have done that, in the real house. It would have been impossible. It was too small.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that kind of brings me to the other half of that question that I should ask first, which was, how are you managing the logistics of all of these moves and try to remember how lighting might have looked, and even just being on a smaller set, for like your students, how are you teaching them how to move efficiently and not get too into the weeds and kind of, maybe go more on what I've said before is emotionally correct and not technically correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a benefit on a movie is that they have the dailies, on a hard drive or whatever. So I can go into the editing room with Wes, and I'll take a snap of it off the. Usually we see it on a giant flat screen in the editing room. The editors are always there with us, and so I have that as a reference, and I just try to create the same mood that was there. That's what we're matching to, and I would create that. Every shot is different. There's no real rule, but we try to, as I said, we try to keep it simple, like in Grand Budapest, the top soft light coming down, and then we might add a little something on this side just to give it a little more shape, and so then, I mean, it's not like some magical process. It's pretty simple.
Well, and also I think I asked that question shitty, so I'll email you about it if I can remember what that was supposed to be. But it's, for some reason I just woke up tired today. It's just
all right.
Too dry. I did one thing I did want to know. You had mentioned a few times that Wes puts together a movie library for each film. And I was wondering what the movie library was for Asteroid City.
Well, one movie that really had an impact on me was Bad Day at Black Rock. And it was Spencer Tracy. It was shot in the desert, anamorphic. I don't know the year it came out. I'm going to guess 60s, or I don't know, and what they were not afraid to do was just, typically in the middle part of the day, cinematographers are inclined to fly giant silks and soften the light and control it, shape it a little more. But they didn't do that. And another film was Paris, Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Bobby Mueller shot. So those were, for me, two that really stood out, as how to use the desert sun and not be typically, and I tell my students is, you don't want the sun behind you. You want to shoot backlighted or side lighted, and that's typically what cinematographers will do. But at first I was I'll be honest, a little skeptical, a little afraid to shoot front light. And, I was always trying to move things around to backlight. But then I started watching I watched the dailies, of course, and I saw kind of, and I became more bold in my choices by doing that, and I think that another movie that I had a little movie club on Sundays because we were all in the same hotel, and so actors, anybody could come, and I like to show One from the Heart because even in our studio setups, just the light changes and things that they were doing with lighting, and it was at that time it's very theatrical and, at that time very revolutionary, and so and I know our studio stuff was all black and white, that was color, but just the way they use lighting and things of that nature, you know, how they shot those. So that was one that I always, with Wes, because I think we were getting more and more theatrical as we go on in our movies. Like, I don't know if you saw Henry Sugar, it's very theatrical.
Yeah.
So that's always a reference that I like to show people, is so that they know. And but yeah, I mean, to me, the main two were those two, of course, and you know, he has a variety of other movies. I'm trying to think, I can't remember all the other ones. And he also has books. And so, you know, the actors and Wes and me, the producers, the production designer, the heads of departments are all in the same hotel. We take over the hotel. And
I love that idea.
You sign them out, and, you know, like a library, and then you return them when you're done, you know. I mean, I'm a Lawrence of Arabia guy, so I had that as well, you know, and how they shot the desert in Lawrence of Arabia, you know, just, you know, how they use light in Lawrence of Arabia.
That does. So, damn it, there's always two questions. For one of them, I'm just going to get them out before I forget. One of them, we're going to ask about photo books, but two, I did want to ask, because, you know, obviously you at this point, you probably bounce between film and digital almost every other film, it feels.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that with digital, obviously, way more sensitive sensor. You can get away with being a little more simple with your setups. You don't have to go as big. But I'm wondering if you can kind of gut check me here. Harder lights. When you talk about Lawrence of Arabia, I just think of like that era of filmmaking. Most light was hard. Yeah. And I'm wondering if hard light equals cinema. Because now that we've gotten so soft, everything feels very kind of not as visually interesting. And then you see someone shooting digital with just hard lights, and you're like, actually, that looks good. Because we avoided hard light for so long because digital sucked when it came to hard light.
Yeah, interesting. Because one thing I've learned starting on French Dispatch, and I carried over to Asteroid City, particularly with black and white film, hard light often looks better. You know,
yeah.
Contrast. And it's something, because I always, like many cinematographers, always lit things very softly and, you know, just look very natural. And, you know, but then I started using more and more hard light because of the black and white. And then I started using it more in color as well. And you look at some of the great, like Vilmos Signals are really someone who I admired. And you look at some of those films he made in the 60s and 70s, there's a lot of hard light in them, you know, and you know, there's something about it that really gives it more cinematic in some ways. And
yeah,
when we do the black and white sequences in Asteroid City, we brought in a theatrical lighting designer from England. And he and I worked together on the lights, and you know, Wes was hoping to achieve, you know, what a TV studio would look like in the 50s or 60s, and you know, and so he brought that kind of knowledge. But what he didn't have was we needed more light for our film, you know, and so we worked together. He was a great guy, and we worked together, you know, just to try to keep that feeling, but translate it to film somehow, you know, and it just, so a lot of those black and white sequences were lit with hard light, you know, and it has a, you know, and it also, you often have multiple shadows in theater.
Right.
In film, that's something like, you know, don't have multiple shadows, but, you know, I learned to kind of embrace that a little bit, because of the presentation and the theatricality of it all, you know, and just, you know, I learned to do things differently than how I would have done if left to my own devices. And I think a lot that paid off. So I encourage, and even in my class the other day, we were recreating a shot, and I was using a lot of hard light, and you know, everyone liked the way it looked, and, you know, it's easier to cut and, you know, easier to shape. And it was, you know, so I'm using it more and more now. And I credit the fact that we were using black and white, you know, where I really was forced to kind of learn it more, you know, putting edge in there, you know. So, and I love film noir, you know, I love those films. You know, And, that's so much of those films were just hard light. I love those movies.
Yeah.
My favorite genre is film noir.
I agree. They had on the Criterion streamer, they had like Gaslight Noir in October, and then now it's Noir November. So there's a lot of good ones.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have the streamer, the Criterion streamer, you get a whole crap ton of them on there.
Yeah. TCM does that sometimes too, as I'm a TCM guy. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I spent a year, like 3 years ago, only shooting black and white photos. And that was incredibly educational for my cinematography work, because I guess at that point I realized on this side of it, I couldn't quite see light the way that I thought.
Yeah.
It was a lot more anamorphic. It was a lot more amorphous. Light was just around, and then you could kind of intensify a direction. But then when I shooting black and white was very much like, oh no, it's here, and then there's shadow here, and then also getting really into photo books, which is what I wanted to ask. Mm-hmm. Seeing how the masters, shape light. But what are some of the photo books that stick out to you? I know you have a good collection.
Well, I'm a Cartier-Bresson guy. I love,
of course.
And when it comes to hard light, actually Ouija is kind of interesting. Yeah. There's a book called Havana. Robert Polidori he went to Havana and took these amazing pictures. One book I often use as reference, there's a guy, Bernie Imes, who did a book called Juke Joint. He went around all these juke joints in, I believe, Mississippi, Alabama, and took these amazing photos in these juke joints. So that's what I use as references a lot, more Robert Frank, the American.
Sure. Yeah.
I gave that to my daughter once. Just compositionally, who is it? There's a guy, and I'm sorry, he did a lot of Newman, Arnold Newman. Is it Arnold Newman? Anyway,
yeah. Thought you were going to say Saul later.
You did a lot of portraits, and so, but for me, Cartier-Bresson, I actually own that Cartier-Bresson, and I own some.
Do you really?
The one I found out later, it's the one picture that he cropped, and it's the guy jumping over tunnels, and it wasn't. I bought it, and I didn't know. I bought it like 20 years ago, and signed by Cartier-Bresson, and I didn't find out until like 3 or 4 years ago that was the only picture he ever cropped. So, oh well.
Well. So I know exactly the photo you're talking about, because I remember someone had done this entire dissertation on the cropping of that image.
Okay.
And how it cut, and the gist of it, if I'm going to sort of summarize and then include my own color commentary, it really did get me out of my head that the image, whether it be photographically or on film or video, whatever, doesn't need to be thin. As long as you can see the end image, you're good. Because for the longest time, I was doing this whole, if I shot film, I would never touch it because, that's film, right? And it's why? Why would you do that? We still use the DI for movie film. What is it about taking a film image that's so special? Why am I being precious about that? When I want it to be different, I can make it different. Yeah.
Well, we do a lot of photography of my son's soccer games, and we have the Canon 5D, and we have a 400 millimeter lens because you can never get close,
Right.
And last summer we went to Portugal and Spain. He was playing over there with the Portuguese and Spanish kids, and I took a ton of pictures. And I find that I don't crop them a lot, but because if you just crop them a little bit, it makes it a much more dynamic photo oftentimes. So I would say maybe 50% of my pictures, I cropped a tiny bit in somewhere or another, or just something distracting on the edge of frame. You don't want to get rid of it. And it's again, I don't blow them up a lot, but, I found that it kind of gave me the template. Now I kind of can just make it a little more focused by cropping it a little bit. And so that's what
I'll show you. Well, it's I don't know where it is, but it's somewhere. Fujifilm lent me that new GFX 100 that they have. Were you at the ASC?
I was probably at a soccer game.
Fair enough. But boy, I've been using it for like a month. They really want it back. They keep emailing me. Sorry, Fuji. But it's 100 megapixels on a medium format sensor. I was at a racetrack and I was taking photos of the cars from forever away, and I would just crop in and get like a 20 megapixel image that looks like, perfect.
Well, years ago I got a Leica M, which is the monochrome Leica. I had a model. They've improved them since I've had it for probably 10 years now, and it changed my life. I mean, it shoots in low light incredibly, and it's all black and white, and just the tones you get are beautiful. And I probably use that camera more than any of my still cameras, is the light, except from shooting soccer where you take the Canon with us. But
right.
Leica M is just gorgeous. I mean, it's amazing the pictures I get. And I typically like to shoot with some depth of field, but with that one, sometimes I even shoot it at 2,
right.
It's just because what it does to the backgrounds is just beautiful, and so if you really want a good black and white digital camera, Leica M is the way to go. And then Leica lenses are just so beautiful.
Yeah. What's funny is I do really want one of those, because like it's that you're shooting black and white. I was like, now I have so much black and white film, but I want the digital, especially because getting in the weeds, but obviously the monochrome sensor is using all the pixels instead of binning up 4 at a time, so it's like so much sharper and clean. It's so nice.
You can shoot at almost no light, whereas film, it's 400 ASA or whatever, where with these Leica cameras, I mean, I use them a lot on the sets, and
sure.
And there's sometimes you're in a place where there's almost no light, an actor's just sitting in the corner, drinking a coffee or something, and I get these incredible photos that you couldn't get any other way, it's outrageous how good they are.
You should start your own photo book. I have the Jeff Bridges book. That's kind of the same thing.
It's the long and Vista.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good one. I bought the Roger Deakins one.
Hold on. This is probably less exciting because you probably have met him. But I got mine signed.
Okay, nice. Yeah, that's a good.
It's a great one.
Yeah, well, and they, the ASC does this thing. I don't know what it is. I think it's now, but they collect photos from all the members.
They did it last weekend.
Oh, did they? Okay. Yeah, I was off in San Diego watching my son play soccer. So, I notice that's how I spend most of my time now. But hopefully he signs a big pro contract, and then we're all set for the rest of our lives.
Right. He can play for LAFC.
Oh, we're LAFC. Hey, wait a minute. Let me show you. I got my LAFC shirt on.
There you go. Hold on. Now it's just show and tell.
Yeah.
There's it. About.
There you go.
There it is.
Here, look at this. LAFC.
Nice. So I had not. Here, I'll join the team here. We got the coaches jacket. They didn't have the black jerseys. They only had the green ones. So I got the coach's jacket, and I feel very cool.
Yeah. Well, I've come. I don't have a green one. But I might. I've come to like the green ones. I like the white ones with the black, the black lettering and stuff. I mean, but my wife gives me a lot of shit when I wear my football stuff. I have
right.
When we were in Portugal, and Spain, I got an Atletico jacket, and I got a Barcelona hat, and I wear all that stuff.
Were you like a soccer fan growing up, or is it just because your son's into it?
Oh, I was not at all, and I was basketball and baseball. Growing up in Chicago, I was a Cub fan. Basketball became my passion, and you know, I watch American football, but it wasn't until my son started playing that I started to really get into it, and now I'm a fanatic. You know, I mean, what my favorite sport in LA to go see used to be the Lakers. Now it would be LAFC. Now, I mean, it would be like, and I started following it much more, and you know, Messi and the whole thing, and you know, and I spent a lot of time in Europe. And many years ago, I was doing a commercial with David Beckham in Manchester when he was playing for Manchester United. I knew nothing about English football, and so I thought, well, I'll buy a Manchester United shirt, you know, and just show everybody I'm into it. So we went from there back to London. I wore my Man U shirt the first day, and the crew was ready to take me out back and beat me up.
Right.
They hated Man U, you know, and they were all Chelsea fans and Arsenal fans, you know. So I learned you got to be careful, you know, you don't want to piss people off. But when I did Mamma Mia 2, I would go to the Chelsea games, you know, at Stamford Bridge, and they were so much fun, you know, and you know, I've become addicted to it. So now I love watching.
Yeah.
I watch all the World Cup games, you know. You know, they were fantastic. You know, the game when LAFC beat Philadelphia last year, that final was just one of the most exciting games I've ever seen. It was
I was lucky. My buddy had season tickets. He just stopped doing it because, you know, whatever. But we had, what would you call it, floor level seats, like kind of right near the supporters stands. And I didn't like. I grew up playing hockey and like watching hockey and stuff, and I thought those fans were like kind of rowdy, maybe. No. The supporter stands at an LAFC game, just nonstop drums and screaming the entire, literally 90 whatever minutes.
The whole time, you know, the smoke and the flags. And yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time in Canada shooting, so I've become a little bit of a hockey fan too, and just, it's so, because you were a hockey player here, I mean, it is so fast. And these guys, so hard. It's amazing how good these guys are. And when this guys shoot, I can't even see the puck. I mean, it's so fast, you know, it's, I have a lot of respect for professional hockey players. They are amazing. But they do it, the speed at which they play, it's just outrageous.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you were saying about, at the beginning of the conversation about how, you know, every generation it levels up a little bit with filmmaking. Same thing's true with hockey. You know, like Gretzky's era, relatively slow if you watch like highlights of it, you know. Obviously no one could touch his point total, but it's just insane how, you know, and it comes down to like nutrition programs and stuff that no one, you know, they're drinking Cokes and smoking darts between sets.
No, training. My son is 13. He's got a personal trainer, you know, I mean, a soccer trainer, and the coaching. He goes to practice 4 days a week, and then they have games all weekend. I mean, we never had that basketball, you know, when I was a kid. And now the basketball kids are all getting the same thing. I mean, you know, it's, and just the training and again, the access to media and being able to watch everything on their computers or on the big, you know, the flat screens. And it's just, he plays FIFA, you know, I mean, it's,
right.
You know, we never had any of that stuff. I just go out back in my back alley and shoot hoops back there with my buddies, you know. That was a whole different world, you know. And yeah, the kids today, film students or hockey players or basketball, whatever, they're way beyond what our generation was, for sure.
Yeah. That brings up, I've interviewed a few teachers, like, you know, comes to mind like Maria Rushka. She teaches at Tisch, I believe, or at least did when I interviewed her. But in any case, is there anything that the students have taught you that's something that's stuck with you or maybe surprised you?
I teach 2 classes, and one of them is advanced cinematography, and I totally at first underestimated how much they knew. Oh, and I brought my light meter. It's 35 millimeter film, and I said, "So, do everybody know how to use this?" And they were like, Yeah.
They all brought out theirs.
And they're taking spot readings. They're doing it all, and I was surprised at the level of competence. And I saw some of the films that they had shot at USC in the past. And I mean, I started thinking, like, what do they need me here for? I mean, these guys are already, they're doing an amazing job, professionally done, and part of that, I think, is because of the digital cameras, you can kind of see what you're going to get, whereas film was always a little bit of a mystery. And I think that's helped people in a lot of ways. Even me, as I've been doing this a long time, having shot so much digitally, it makes me feel a little more at ease at not playing it safe. I mean, I used to joke the difference between digital and film lighting was, in film, you pull a single out of the fill, and digitally you put a double in the fill, and it's, but it's kind of true in a way, and because, and I always encourage them not to play it safe. I say, be a little risky, because particularly young students, and I was the same way, tend to overlight everything,
Right.
And, as you get on, you kind of realize that, maybe you don't have, particularly digitally, you don't have to use a lot of lights. I mean,
one thing they didn't teach us in film school, which is probably an oversight, I'm sure they do it now, ASU, but negative fill, wasn't a thing when we were there.
Yeah, no, I teach negative fill, definitely. And, particularly outside, we always take 4x floppies out, put them up over them and stuff like that. And the other thing I really stress, particularly, I don't have to do this with my advanced class, but the other class, which is kids more intermediate, it's just because you turn a light on doesn't mean you're lit. That's just the beginning. It's how you shape that light. Do you put a diffusion frame in front of it? Do you want to make a top or a cut? Do you want to cut? And that's something that I don't think they get taught a lot in film school, is how do you shape something? And that's turning the light on is the first step in my book. Then you shape it. I just noticed I'm going to have to go in a minute.
Yeah, we're way over time. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I just looked down when you said.
I didn't know it either. I mean, it's been very enjoyable, but wait a minute, 1:15, I better run to it.
Yeah.
Hey, it's been fun. I hope.
Yeah.
It's you. And
totally. We'll have you back on. We'll continue the chat later and
anytime.
Get more into it. Awesome, man.
Thank
you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. As this is an independently funded podcast, we rely on support from listeners like you. So if you'd like to help, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/frameandrefpod. We really appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for listening.